Nick Saban has exited stage left. So where exactly will the tide turn now?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by Gametime, and thank you for making your first listen every single day. We would have loved to have been on the air just a little bit sooner, but the news is coming in so fast and furious. We're trying to wait and give all the best we can, but we could wait no longer, Jimmy. Nick Saban has officially retired, and later on in this show, I want to talk about a few stats that are just amazing from him because we still need to pay homage to the GOAT. But right now, Dan Lanning, out. He will be staying at Oregon. That is who I wanted. I don't feel like it's somebody Alabama had to have. But nobody else, really, I can't think of anybody else outside of maybe Kirby Smart that would just make me do cartwheels. So I guess a quick note on where you think everything is right now.
I think there's a couple of names out there that would make me do cartwheels. I just don't know how realistic those names are. For instance, Sark. I think that would be a home run, a grand slam, a slam dunk, a 75-yard field goal, whatever. It would be a 4th and 31 gravedigger. It would be great. But how realistic is that? I don't think it's realistic at all. But I'm told it's, maybe. So I think there are names where that would that could really excite people. I just don't know how realistic a Sark is.
Let's stay there with Sark for a second. Stark would be good. Tony Stark, I would like to have him. Iron Man.
He's got an iron constitution.
Yes, he does. Anywho, so let's stick with Sark for a second. I was just on radio in Montgomery again and was talking about this, and they said, well, what do you think about Sark? I said, I'd be happy with Sark, but let's also remember this. Sark did lose to Kansas at home before Kansas was any good, just a few years ago. Now, he made the playoffs this year, and that's wonderful. But they lost to a pretty mediocre Oklahoma squad. They did go on the road and beat Alabama. There are a lot of positives. I'm just saying, I think home run is relative. It's probably a home run in this lineup of coaches. I don't think there's obviously not a Nick Saban out there. That's the thing. There never will be. There never will be another Nick Saban. That deal's cut. We lived through it, and it was awesome. But now, and I want to take a minute to just talk about how awesome Nick Saban is. But time marches on, and we've got to get a coach here, and we got to get one pretty quickly, especially the way the climate is now with the transfer portal. So I think Sark would be great. I would love Sark. I think there are a lot of reasons to get him if he would come. And somebody goes, well, why would he leave Texas for Alabama? The same reason people thought Nick Saban would leave Alabama for Texas. And look, the two programs aren't that crazy far apart, and Alabama actually has a better history than Texas.
It'd be lateral in terms of pay, facilities, in so many ways. Could be Sark's been in both places. Could be that this is his favorite place. I mean, this is where he was most comfortable and enjoyed it. Could be any number of things. Bo Davis just left Texas for a seemingly lateral move. People can say, I just had a buddy tell me, well, Bo Davis left for more money. Well, that's true, but no one has more money than Texas. Texas just chose not to pay Bo Davis what LSU was choosing to pay him. But Texas has unlimited funds. Sark wouldn't leave Alabama for the money, unless it was just money that Texas refused to pay, which would be hard for me to believe. I'm just saying that to me, it'd be a home run. Everybody's excited about Dan Lanning. He was my choice too, so I'm not going to backpedal. Dan Lanning was Jimmy's first choice. But let me say this, a couple of things. Number one, Dan Lanning has been a head coach for 2 years in his whole life. He's been the head coach for about 26 games, and that's it ever. He's also 37 years old, and this game, this program, the school this team, it can eat people alive. Dan Lanning also had a $20 million buyout, and I think people take that wrong. They don't understand the difference between a factor and barrier. The $20 million buyout was not a barrier to Alabama hiring Dan Lanning, but it was a major factor. What that means is I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, you might you might find a stock that you like and on the Wall Street Stock Exchange, and you find a stock and you're like, I really like this. As a matter of fact, I'm really sold on this. I'm going to invest $50,000 of my money in this stock, and I've never invested $50,000 in anything, but I really believe in this stock. Will you invest in the Dan Lanning stock? You're starting with the 20 million. I mean, it's a heck of a gamble. And there's this factor that no one knows or that very few know about that don't read the legislation. But the NCAA may soon, and by soon, I mean in the next month or so, pass legislation that allows schools to contribute to the NIL money. If that's the case, that 20 million needs to be spent on NIL and not a coach. And if you think I'm wrong, go ask the 32 NFL teams whether they spend money on their coach or on their roster. I think that is a factor too. If schools are soon allowed to spend school money paying the players via NIL, then you better be more careful than ever with your 20 million. That, by the way, if you paid it to Oregon, get that 20 million buyout that goes payable to the University of Oregon. Where do you think that goes? To Oregon's collective. If schools can, so now you're just buying, Oregon's roster for the next 4 years. So I'm just saying that 20 million was a factor with any decision about Dan Lanning. Was it a barrier? No. If Dan Lanning was Alabama's number one candidate and Greg Byrne is like, this is my guy, I couldn't be more sold, then Alabama would come up with the money. But you do have to factor in the cost like all of us do with every major transaction in our lives.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, in a sense, all these big schools have unlimited funds. In another sense, that doesn't mean you just spend it willy-nilly or you won't have unlimited funds for very long. So
that's exactly right. There has to be fiscal sanity.
Okay, we brought up
in the process. DeBoer, who I like a lot, by the way, has a $12 million buyout. I use that as a perfect example. $12 million is still a huge, huge buyout. It's also substantially less than $20 million.
All right, let's talk about DeBoer and a few other guys here in the second segment. But now I want to tell everybody about Gametime. You guys know I love the Gametime app. It is fantastic. And look, the Gametime app is going to be used this year because whoever Alabama's coach is, there's probably going to be high demand for that first game. That's going to be a big deal. And you want to have the Gametime app to be access to these wonderful seats. You can see where your seat will be, last minute deals, all these great things you shouldn't have to worry about when you buy tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can get the last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, views from the seat. That's wonderful. I've used that when I got my Miami Dolphins tickets from Gametime. I love that option. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. So, man, it's just awesome. It's the place to find last-minute seats all the time. With zone deals, you pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for big-time savings. That helps you a lot. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we've talked about Sark a little bit. I think we would be in agreement. If Sark were to come, wonderful. I'm all for it. I'm not saying he's gonna. I'm just saying that'd be wonderful. Now let's talk about some of these other guys. You mentioned DeBoer.
Yep.
He's a guy that was just in the national championship guy. This is a guy who, by the way, beat Dan Lanning twice this past year with, in my opinion, probably lesser overall talent.
Agreed.
Now, did he catch lightning in a bottle with a fantastic quarterback? Yes. I mean, maybe.
By the way, his quarterback, the quarterback he signed at Indiana that loved him so much, he followed him to Washington.
Yeah. So now here's a question. I have no idea what his Southern connections would be and if he'd be able to recruit in this area. Maybe that is where you hire somebody who can do such things. And that would be wonderful. But then what you're doing is you may be handcuffing him to a guy that he may not want on his staff. Who knows? There's DeBoer is an option that I would like. Would you consider that okay? Again, relative. Would you consider that a home run in this climate? I guess I would consider it a standing triple.
Would be completely on board with Kalen DeBoer in the sense. I mean, see, a lot of Alabama fans just don't know him. I mean, he couldn't be more divorced from the South than he is. He is a lifetime Dakota. He's from the Dakotas and coached in South Dakota, and then Fresno, and then Washington. It might as well have been in Europe, for Alabama fans. So they don't know him. But I think the more that you know him, the more you would like about him. He's an offensive guy. He's a quarterback guy. His record as a head coach is a stunning 104 wins and 12 losses. 104 and 12 as a head coach. He has won not only big, he's won immediately at all three places. Now, two of these places are very small. He coached NAIA ball. That's where he racked up most of these wins, winning 3 national championships at the NAIA level, eventually bumping up to Fresno State, which is a group of 5 school. But what did he do at Fresno after the COVID year? He won like 10 games at Fresno. He was only at Fresno 2 years before he caught the attention of the University of Washington, but he won 10 games at Fresno, or not as not 9 or 10 at Fresno. Then he goes to Washington, where he takes over in the midst of a scandal, the Jimmy Lake scandal at Washington. He takes over, immediately wins 10. What does he do in year 2? National championship game. So Kalen DeBoer has been a tremendous winner in all of his stops. And again, an offensive guy. He's the right age. He's, I think, 49 years old. That to me is, he's 12 years older than Dan Lanning. That's a lot of experience and maturity. I think, from what little I know of his personality, I think he's got a good Tuscaloosa, Alabama personality, serious about football, old school, though he has kind of a new school offense. Penix, his quarterback, finished 3rd in the Heisman, probably should have finished 2nd, frankly. I would be excited about Kalen DeBoer, but I also fully realize that a lot of the fan reaction would be negative because they don't know him.
So then let's talk about Mike Norvell at FSU.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in this to watch FSU fans melt down even more.
Yeah.
And the fact that Alabama plays
that would be a fun
FSU
part.
in Tallahassee in 2 years. But I don't know if I'm excited about that one or not. Oddly, I would probably be more excited about that one if he were still the head coach at Memphis and doing well versus because, I still remember he loses to Jacksonville State. Even this year, a lot of close games. And then, the defense was amazing and he did a great job and he's a good recruiter. So I can get behind it, but it certainly doesn't necessarily light my fire.
I would get behind Mike Norvell. There's other names I prefer on the surface, but I would get behind it in this sense. He's winning now at the biggest stage in football. He's a Power 5 coach who, as we speak, is very successful as a Power 5 head football coach. I think he's the right age, sort of like the offense. And I like that he's an offensive guy, but his defense is really good. I like that. And I do think that he does a pretty good job as a recruiter. I like that. My reservations would be about personality. I'm not sure that that's the right personality for this job at Alabama. And fan reaction isn't going to be great at all. Let's remember the last time we saw Norvell. I'll be honest. I'd even say it after they hired him here. What happened in the Orange Bowl was a disgrace. I was kind of rooting for it to happen because of the Alabama or Florida State making the playoff thing. So I was kind of rooting for that to happen. But at the same time, that was a disgrace, losing by 60 in a bowl game, playing with a team that just didn't care about the result in the game, regardless of whether they were all freshmen or third teamers. I don't care. That was disgraceful. So I have reservations about it, but he won big at Memphis. He won big and he was exciting at Memphis, and he did so well at Memphis. He got the Florida State job, and he inherited a toxic mess, left behind by the lap. Taggart left Florida State. I mean, I've heard stories. I've even heard stories through former Florida State players. It was a mess. He took over a mess and only won 3 games in year 1, I think. It took 4 years, and finally he's the best team in the ACC. It took 4 years. Is building a team at Florida State in 4 years from scratch and making them the best team in the ACC in 4 years, is that an accomplishment or an indictment? I mean, because that's a weak league, especially with Clemson faltering. So, but now that all said, Mike Norvell has done enough really impressive things in his career that I would, of course, be on board with that. I'm just saying I would prefer others myself, but that's a name to watch.
Yeah, that is certainly a name to watch. And again, I could get behind it. Lane Kiffin, I think that's a non-starter. I mean, I guess it could happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. And here's what I think. It would make Alabama the most interesting team in college football from the moment he's hired to the moment he's ultimately fired.
It would be like, I mean, I could come up with a lot of analogies, and I'm about to steal one from John Mulaney, but I'm not going to use that because it's John Mulaney's stand-up thing. So, yeah, let's use it. Okay, it's Mulaney's joke about something else, but it fits perfectly here. Alabama hiring Lane is like a horse in a hospital.
Yeah.
It's going to be entertaining. You don't know what's going to happen. It could be something really funny, but it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to have a horse in a hospital. It's too fraught with bad things.
Potential disaster.
It really, but it's a potential disaster. It just doesn't belong, but it's entertaining. You would watch. If there was video, you probably would not turn it off. So it would be a reality show. And in reality, it would be exactly that. It'd be a reality show. Lane would be enormously entertaining. He would be popular with the fans. He would say things that would make everyone so fired up. He would have levels of success that would be great. But I would just say that hiring Lane Kiffin would be a fantastic idea for maybe the next 2 years, and potentially disastrous for 5 to 10 years. That's just my feeling. Now, that said, if you hire Lane Kiffin, I'm going to tell you this, and I would be on board with this. Lane Kiffin would win at Alabama, especially initially.
He might have like a Larry Coker type thing, where you win a national championship year 1 and then just crash and burn. This is what I said on the Montgomery station earlier today. I said, having Nick Saban as your coach is like having Sydney Sweeney as your girlfriend for 6 months. I don't care who you date next. It's not going to be as good. If you are able to somehow go in a time machine and get Linda Carter from 1976, okay. But whoever you date after Sydney Sweeney is not going to be as good as Sydney Sweeney.
I think we should spend the rest of the show discussing your choice of Sydney Sweeney there. That's an interesting choice. That's an interesting choice you went to there.
Well, she's the it girl.
She is the it girl. I'm aware she's the it girl. I'm just a little surprised.
Good reason, by the way.
I'm just a little surprised. I'm not against it. I'm just a little surprised that that's where you went.
It's sort of like her and Lane Kiffin.
Her.
Oh.
She's in that rom-com with that. Who's that guy? Glenn Powell. He's the female version of her. The it guy. Maverick, the fighter pilot. Yeah, they're in a rom-com right now. And I could just so easily see how that meeting, in a production studio in Hollywood, like, we've got to get Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell in a movie together. Well, what's the movie about? Does it matter?
Yeah.
We don't have a script. Does it matter?
It's just them, like,
it's just
in a park for 2 hours. And everybody walks out just bravo.
Some idiot like me or you in the background going, it's a show about nothing.
All right. Jimmy, when we come back, I got to talk about this stat that was tweeted out about Nick Saban. It's just, I mean, there are going to be a bunch of them. When his 30 for 30 comes out, it's going to be amazing. But we got to talk about this. Right now, I want to tell you about FanDuel, though. FanDuel.com/lockedon. The NFL is wrapping up, but the playoffs, you can still get in on the action with FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, whether you win or whether you lose. You cannot beat that with a stick. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find all these popular parlays and more. Much, much, much more, by the way. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a chip shot field goal to send you to the Super Bowl. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Matt Hayes tweeted out something, Jimmy, that I knew all this, because one thing I said yesterday on one of the shows, you and I both did a bunch of shows yesterday after the news broke. And shout out to Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, who's the one that called me and alerted me that Nick Saban had retired. That's how secretive all this was. But Matt Hayes, and one of the things I said on these shows was, the thing that makes Nick Saban so great is you can actually remember all of his losses. Now, and he's coached at Alabama for 16 years, 17 years, whatever it is. And Matt Hayes tweeted this out. These are the 22 coaches who beat Nick Saban at Alabama. Gus Malzahn did it 3 times. And the thing about that, one of them was the kick 6. One of them was when Alabama had Tua Tagovailoa hurt and doinked a field goal. Now, the other time he beat us by 12 points. Kudos to that. Les Miles beat Alabama 3 times in overtime in the game of the century once. Another one was the
07.
07, which was like it was David versus Goliath, and Alabama still almost pulled it off. And then the other one was in 2010, and that was also a close game as well. Dabo Swinney did it twice. One time was a blowout. Again, kudos. The other time was on a pick play that won them the national championship. Urban Meyer did it twice. One time was against Ohio State. That team was loaded, by the way, and Alabama still had a Hail Mary to win it. The other time was when he had Tim Tebow and one of the great teams of all time. Hugh Freeze did it twice. One time when Alabama had 5 turnovers, and they still only lost by 5. Another one when Alabama only lost by 3 on a play that really, it was an interception that, boy, it looked like he was out of bounds almost. Mark Richt did it once in overtime. Bobby Bowden did it in 07. Sylvester Croon also did it in 07. Charlie Weatherby also did it in 07. Tommy Tuberville did it in 07. Steve Spurrier did it with South Carolina on a day that South Carolina would have beaten the Bears in 2010.
Stephen Garcia
did it with the comeback, but it was a 1-score game. Kevin Sumlin did it with Johnny Manziel on a 1-score game when Alabama had somebody jump off sides on a punt returner. Alabama probably wins. Bob Stoops did it in a bowl game that didn't matter. Ed Orgeron did it in another game of the century and only did it by 5 points. Alabama still had a shot. Jimbo Fisher did it on a last-second field goal. Kirby Smart did it for the national championship, but Alabama also paid him back several times over. Josh Heupel did it on a last-second field goal. Brian Kelly did it on the overtime play. Steve Sarkisian did it, kudos to him, by 10 points this year, and Jim Harbaugh did it this year in overtime. What I'm telling you is all these games were 1 score or overtime, or frankly, Alabama should have won anyway. This is amazing. This is insane.
It really is. Where is Sidney Sweeney on that list?
Sidney Sweeney would have beaten Alabama every time they played.
Just distraction alone. Oldest trick in the book. Oldest trick in the book right there.
She's great on double D defense. Defense is what I mean.
I get it.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, it is amazing. I would go with most amazing stat. I know that's not what we're really doing, but it's not a stat. It's just this concept, and it has a lot to do with Luke's list there. Nick Saban eliminated the idea that Alabama would be upset. He eliminated. Sure, Alabama lost games in which they were favored to win, but was it really an upset when you lose to Kirby Smart in Georgia, or lose to the greatest LSU team of all time, or lose to Cam Newton in 2010. I mean, what I'm saying he eliminated, Luke, was if you weren't a good or great team, you were not beating Alabama. You weren't going to win the game. He eliminated the true upset right out of the equation. That's like eliminating air disasters. Like all of a sudden you woke up one day and planes never crashed. I mean, that's Nick Saban. It's like we would go to games and there was no chance in heck Alabama would lose. And for those of you who are like, duh, then y'all don't remember the Mike Shula era or the Franchione era or Curry or Perkins or anything other than Bear Bryant. There was always a chance Alabama could lose the game no matter who they played. But Nick Saban eliminated the very idea that Alabama would lose because he won about 1 million of those type games in a row. Now, there were some close calls, and there was the occasional, oh, you lost us. But look, we all know the Stephen Garcia game, and we all know that Alabama lost at South Carolina, who wasn't a great team. That was 14 years ago, and we're still talking about it because we all know what game that is. 14 years ago. That was pretty much the last time something like that happened.
Yeah, again, and when you think about how many times did Bama actually get the crap beat out of them? I mean, Clemson in that national championship game, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They beat the heck out of us, and they shouldn't have. I mean, that Alabama team was really good. They should have won that game. I mean, in my opinion, I think
that was one of the low points, and it was a national championship game. And if we go back to that game, Alabama really won the game or played to a draw on first and second down. If I remember, we got murdered on third down. We couldn't make third downs on offense and couldn't stop them on third down on defense. But first and second down, we did pretty well. Does that count for anything?
And kudos to Clemson. They beat the heck out of us.
Oh, yeah. Well deserved. Yeah. And they had it going on then and then fell off. Alabama didn't. Nick Saban was still coaching great the day he retired. He was still a great football coach the day he retired. You can't say the same about Bobby Bowden or Joe Paterno. You can't even say that about Bill Belichick, who's the greatest NFL head coach. Can't say it about Coach Brown either. After 1979, the program started descending, and it was 3 years of descent, ultimately bottoming out in Ray Perkins' second year when Alabama had a losing season. And in large part to what Ray Perkins inherited, there was no transfer portal back then. You had to recruit your way out of having a barren roster then, and that took 2 or 3 cycles in that time.
All right, so hopefully we'll have some news soon, Jimmy. And as soon as we have some news,
it is going to be soon. We feel like Greg Byrne thought that this would be wrapped up in 3 days. 3 days would be roughly a Saturday by 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think that I won't be surprised if we know something Saturday morning is kind of what I'm thinking in my head. Saturday morning. That's my guess in terms of when it would happen.
Well, we will. Right. We might talk tomorrow. We'll definitely talk Saturday. Sure. Until then, roll Tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.